Good evening, everybody. It's absolutely wonderful to see you all out. Thanks a million for coming to this fantastic community event at Tenters Miscellany, celebrating 100 years of the Liberties neighbourhood from 1922 to 2022. It's fantastic. God, the turnout's amazing. It was actually the hottest ticket in town. There was fights breaking out and everything to get a ticket tonight. People touting tickets outside and everything. Garth Brooks wouldn't be in it for the drama surrounding this evening's tickets. So thanks a million for coming out on this horrible night. I don't know what it's doing out there. It's raining or windy or both, whatever, but we're in here and it's great. I was delighted to be asked to host the event. It came about, Maria O'Reilly, our resident historian. You should be calling her Lady Tenters at this point. She's such a passion for the area and knows so much. If there's anything you need to know historically, that's the lady to ask, not me. I'm just going to be hopping up and down in between various different items and introducing people. But it all came about. Maria has such a passion for the area that she set up a committee, Tenters 100, to celebrate the centenary and put on different events throughout the last year or two. There was planting of trees and there was historical walks and there was songs and dance and loads of shenanigans, and I have to mention the restoration of our fabulous road signs, which also came about. So this is COVID then kind of hit and we put a stop to all that kind of stuff, and this is kind of a more formal, I suppose, celebration of the centenary. So it's down to Maria. Seamus Dooley and Henrietta McCurvey then had a conversation and said, let's do tonight, and that's how this all came about. And so thanks a million to all of them and the committee, 2100, for putting it all together. I'd also like to thank the Hyatt for the room, and of course it's a DCC, a Dublin City Council funded event, so thank you so much to Dublin City Council. We wouldn't be here, I don't think, if it wasn't for them. There's going to be refreshments after the performances, and that is courtesy of Genora Credit Union. Thank you very much. It was originally tea and coffee, but now we've upgraded to wine. Red and white. So thanks a million. It's great to see you. I've been here 18 years. I live in Clarencebank Road, for those of you who don't know me, but I do know most of you here tonight. It's a fantastic neighbourhood. We have our Oscar Square and our Marlowe & Co Cafe and our WhatsApp group, the Tenters, the Oscar Square events, or as I like to call it, a done deal. If anybody new to the area hasn't joined, join. You get loads of free stuff. My whole house is kitted out with a whole load of stuff that these people didn't want, and it looks fantastic. I actually have an air fryer if anyone's interested. Just DM me, please, if you're interested. Okay, I think I've said enough. Have I said everything? Seamus looked at me and go, get on with it. Okay, I am going to introduce the very first item this evening. I'm very excited about this. We have the Uilleann Piper. You're here, we're ready to go, and you are going to be performing. It's Noel Pocock, and he's performing The Maid of the Spinning Wheel, The Flags of Dublin, and The Liffey Banks. Please welcome Noel Pocock. Thank you so much. ladies and gentlemen, Nola Brady.
Thanks very much, Sue. Good evening. What a wonderful privilege it is for me, invited by Seamus to join you all in the Tenters and your happy centennial. Oft in the stilly night, ere slumber chains have bound me, fond memory brings the light of other days around me. The smiles, the tears, the boyhood years, the words of love unspoken, the eyes that shone now dimmed and gone, the cheerful hearts now broken. Thus in a still night, ere slumber chains have bound me, fond memory brings the light of other days around me. Then I remembered all the friends so linked together. I've seen around me fall like leaves in wintry weather. I feel like one who treads along some banquet hall deserted, whose lives are fled, whose garlands dead, and all but he departed. Thus in the stilly night, ere slumber chains had bound me, sad memory brings the light of other days around me. Thank you.
Nola Brady, thanks a million. We now have a lovely piece by Porrick Turley. It's called An Aerial View, and in this piece, Porrick recalls the excitement and wonder generated by the arrival of the first television men to the Tenters. Ladies and gentlemen, Porrick Turley.
Living in the 50s in the Fairbrother fields with the title of the piece. Younger folk will find this memory somewhat absurd, or indeed, perhaps amusing. I'm talking about the first time a television set made its way onto Tarnswing Road, or indeed perhaps into Fairbrother's fields, as the Tenters was then known. I do remember in Skoltrasse there was a football tournament featuring the local teams from the catchment area, including Parkstead, Maryland, Dolphinsburn and Drimnagh. The team from the immediate school area was called Tenters and was captained by the late Jack Kelly, who became a well-known journalist with the Irish Press Group. Jack lived in Clough Cottages on Tarnswing Road. I lived on Tarnswing Road where nobody had a television and most people had a wireless. The price of a TV set was almost the same as a Ford Anglia car. It was well beyond the reach of most people. You can imagine the excitement when Willie O'Connor, who lived in number 44, acquired a television set. The arrival of the men to erect the television area caused quite a stir. We were all agog when this contraption came into our midst. Watching the men erecting the aerial was great entertainment. Children clung to the railings for a better view, while the adults formed themselves into a Greek chorus across the road. The aerial had to be attached to the chimney. Onlookers wondered what would happen in a storm or a bad snowfall. Mrs. Bulger at number 43 gave the proceedings a very jaundiced look. Before departing to Johnstown Church, where she and a few other neighbours headed off every day for prayer, somebody in the chorus sung Crawthumpers. There were sundry sounds coming from the Greek chorus as the engineers worked on the aerial. Eamon Byrne helpfully intervened to point out in what direction England lay. Due east. This was a crucial bit of information, as the BBC was the only station available. Paddy Barry mumbled something about the BBC coming in from the 6 counties. After about 2 hours, the men declared the aerial correctly affixed and went inside to connect the television set and get it working. We all hung around outside as if waiting for white smoke from the conduit. Eventually the men came out, got in the van and departed without a word. Willie was a farrier in CIE who lived with his sister Kitty. He was a bachelor. He also owned what I believe to be the second car on the road. The first was owned by Harry Gill, who had left by then, before selling his house to my late father in 1955. To our surprise and delight, Willie started to invite neighbours into his house to watch television on weekends. It was almost like a cinema. Children would go in around 5 o'clock to watch children's programmes, the adults in the evening. People watched television in the dark. It was only with the arrival of rental television that the orange-coloured lamp became popular to reduce the glare. The screen was very small, a mere 16 inches, 40 centimetres in new money. The O'Connors were very generous, but I'm not convinced Kitty was as happy as Willie with us traipsing through the house. Programmes I remember were Potts on the Phantom Piper, Wells Fargo, Dixon of Dock Green, What's My Line, The Charlie Drake Show, the Black and White Minstrel Show, which of course would not be acceptable today. There was also the Eamon Andrews Show on Saturday night, in which we took immense pride, as Eamon came from St. Thomas Road. Now, this was all great free fun and entertainment. However, there was a fly in the ointment. Larry Whelan, a cobbler. Larry lived next door to number 45 and worked in a garden outhouse. He had to use machinery, and this caused interference in the television. BBC reception was poor enough at the best of times, and cable was of course unheard of. So when Larry set his machine in motion, the screen would be a mass of interference, making viewing impossible. On many a Saturday evening, this caused a bit of trouble with some of the older men muttering the odd expletive. Would that so-and-so never get a bloody suppressor on his machine? During this hiatus, the men would start sorting out the problems of the world. Eventually, Larry would finish and all would be back in order. In fact, many Saturdays, Larry would join us after work. Oddly, nobody ever mentioned the interference. It was only men who came in to watch television. Perhaps the women were too busy. I recall seeing the 1957 FA Cup final and the 1958 World Cup final in O'Connor's, and our first introduction to the then 17-year-old Pele. Those were days when Alexa and Siri were unknown creatures, and nobody went viral.
Next up, I'm going to fly to this because it's a long evening. We have a long programme, so I'm going to invite Maria O'Reilly up to do her piece. She's exploring her relationship with an area she's known all her life. I've often walked. Maria O'Reilly.
Can you all hear me?
Always.
Clarence Mangan, Ingram, Petrie, Madden, Jeffrey Keating, O'Donovan, O'Curry, O'Carolan. The roads where I took my first steps, where I played games of my childhood, beds, known elsewhere as hopscotch, marbles, chase, skipping, where I swung on ropes from the ornate lampposts, and where I first learned the art of how to ride a bike and later how to drive. These are the roads that I have daily walked, and where I can trace each pathway I have taken in my life. I always knew the Tenters had another name, Fairbrother's Fields. Fairbrother's Fields, a name as familiar to me as Kerrygold, Jacobs, or Guinness. I vaguely remember a letter addressed to somebody, most likely my Uncle Frank, with the Fairbrother's Fields included in the address. Born in 1895, Uncle Frank lived with us in number 18 O'Curry Road. He was actually my mother's uncle, my great uncle, but to everyone, family and friends, he was simply Uncle Frank. It was his mother and father, Michael and Elizabeth Mullen, who first moved into the house in 1922. Although not born in the Tenters, it was where my parents, Paddy Gill and Rita Mullen, also played their own childhood games and learned all the things they did as they moved through life. They grew up here. My father on O'Carolan Road, where his own father, Joe Gill, newly widowed, brought his 7 young children to live here in the early 1930s. My mother grew up on O'Curry Road, where her father, Jim Mullen, also newly widowed, brought his 4 young children to live with his parents in their home a decade later. My family background has instilled a deep and abiding sense of place, a personal pride and even responsibility to the memory of parents, grandparents and great-grandparents, and to the streets where they so often walked. One memory stands out. It was before I made my first Holy Communion, so I wouldn't have been 7. I vividly recall walking to Mass one morning and noticing the cobblestones on Cow Parlour. Although my great-grandparents had died before I was born, I remember realising that they must have walked this road many times before. At that early age, I understood I was walking in the footsteps of those gone before me. Those cobblestones are still there, right opposite where I now live. I see them every day. Throughout the years, I listened to my parents, grandparents, and through my mother's memory, my great-grandparents' stories about living in the Tenters. The times my great-grandmother, Elizabeth Mullen, would get lost coming home from Meath Street in the church, because the church on Dunor Avenue wouldn't have been built then, when she first moved here in the early 1920s. The banshee of Clarence Mangan Road that my father was convinced he heard scream out one night as he made his way up Duty's Hill. Surprisingly, though, until a very short time ago, we never questioned the familiar street names or those honoured with the distinct green street signs. Quite possibly my great-grandparents, Michael and Elizabeth Mullen, would have known the answer, because they were already living on O'Curry Road when it was named in 1924. It was known as Road F for the first 2 years of its existence. Over 90 years after my family first moved into the Tenters, I found myself eventually questioning the naming of the roads. I experienced what I like to call my Tenters lightbulb moment. One evening in 2014, sitting in a UCD lecture hall, my tutor was reading out a list of recommended reading material. Many of the names were curiously familiar. With each one, I'd excitedly intervene like a bingo player shouting, "House!" proclaiming that yet another antiquarian had a street named in his honour in the Tenters. I had never heard before of these men, never mind appreciating their historic significance or contribution as Gaelic scholars. There and then, I promised to find out more about these men, and they were all men, familiar, yet total strangers to a child of the Tenters. It was Alderman Tom Kelly who decided that at least one housing scheme should honour not the martyred dead, but poets, writers, musicians, antiquarians. James Clarence Mangan, John Ingram, Sir John T. Gilbert, George Petrie, Richard Robert Madden, Geoffrey Keating, John O'Donovan, Eugene O'Curry, Turlock O'Carolan. No longer strangers, but dolmens round my Tenters childhood.
I would like to invite up here Sally Core, who is going to do a piece now, going to perform Biddy Mulligan, The Pride of the Coombe.
I'm a buxom fine widow, I live on the street. In Dublin they call it the Coombe. I sell second-hand clothes on a Saturday night. Me palace consists of one room. On Patrick Street corner for 46 years, I stood there, I tell you no lie. And while I stood there, nobody would dare to say dark, no, black was the white of me eye. You may travel from Clare to the county Kildare, from Drogheda right back to Macroom. And where will you see a fine widow like me, Biddy Mulligan, the pride of the Coombe, me boys, Biddy Mulligan, the pride of the Coombe. I sell apples and oranges and nuts and split peas, bananas and sugar sweet sticks. I sell second-hand clothes on a Saturday night, and the floor of me stall is the street. I sell fish on a Friday, laid out on a dish, sweet mackerel and lovely ray. I sell herrings, fresh herrings, lovely sweet herrings that once swam in dear Dublin Bay. You may travel from Clare to the county Kildare, from Drogheda right back to Macroom. And where will you see a fine widow like me, Biddy Mulligan, the pride of the Coombe, me boys, Biddy Mulligan, the pride of the Coombe. I have a son Mick, and he plays on the flute. He belongs to the Longford Street Band. It would do your heart good for to see him march out when the band goes to Dollymount Strand. In the park on a Sunday I cut quite a dash. All the neighbours look on in surprise. With me bonnet so tall and me grand paisley shawl would dazzle the white of their eye. You may travel from Clare to the county Kildare, from Drogheda right back to Macroom. And where will you see a fine widow like me, Biddy Mulligan, the pride of the Coombe, me boys, Biddy Mulligan, the pride of the Coombe. We go again. You may travel from Clare to the county Kildare, from Drogheda right back to Macroom. And where would you see a fine widow like me, Biddy Mulligan, the
Sally Corlos. I think we should all have a sing-song afterwards, actually, out in the bar, and you can host that. Next up we have Tony. Tony's part of the Tenters Memory Gathering Group, and he would like to do a piece which evokes the special sounds and sense of his Liberties childhood in smells, bells and yelps. Please welcome Tony Corcoran.
Okay, good evening all. One of my earliest memories from childhood in the 1940s were the Sunday morning bells. I was a toddler when I managed to push open the door of the good sitting room. That's the one with the carpet. the one that reserved for the parish priest and the insurance man. And I ventured over to the window, entranced by the musical sounds, the cacophony of church bells. There was a Miscellany ringing sounds. Later I learned they were from the churches of the Liberties. Christ Church, St. Patrick's Cathedral, High Street, Francis Street, John's Lane. Then later, when I became an altar boy in Teresa's Church in North Avenue, it was part of the big thrill of an altar boy to go out and ring the big bell at the end of the church. It required one big sharp pull down and then it shot up of its own accord, and if you held onto the rope very tightly, you flew up in the air and you came down with your clothes swinging in the air. Of course, it was the other great thrill of being an altar boy was when you rang the bell at the consecration of Mass. And I think when I started there wasn't even a bell there, it was a sort of gong that you banged. Now, then of course, another bell. Everybody had a bell on their bike. And of course, where did we get the bell? From Paddy Wheeler's in Cork Street. Remember Paddy with a strange hand, if I remember, when he was selling the stuff over the counter. And of course, off you went on your bike, digging it as you went along, and you met all your pals. Then one other noise, not quite a bell, was in the area of the White Swan Laundry, when the big siren would go at 8 o'clock in the morning to bring the workers in, again at lunchtime and again at the end of their day's work. Now, moving on to smells. Growing up at home, life was all about smells. The scorched smell of my younger siblings' nappies drying in front of the fire. The smell of burnt milk on the cooker. The loose tea in the tea caddy had a lovely smell. And then the musty smell from the closet under the stairs. Out on the street, there was the smell of washing soda from the White Swan Laundry. And then the sweet aroma of fresh tobacco wafting down from the Will's factory up on the south side of the road. Of course, there was the stench of Keefs and Knackers. Competing with the smell from Guinness, a lovely aroma of mashed barley and sweet malt. Then there were the smells that you could actually see. You can see the smell, yes? If you crossed Cork Street, went down Marylebone Lane, there were clouds of blue smoke coming out of Plunkett's roast house. And the blue smoke stank. It was actually malt being burnt, and it made your eyes water. Now, going to Mass on a Sunday, the men smelled of hair oil. Crossing, this was important because one of the hairstyles of the time was the DA. No further explanation needed. The most popular hairdressing then was Brill Cream, which you kind of pushed into your hair and got a bit on the corner of your ear as well. Yeah. Then there was Brilliantine, a form of green, sweet-smelling goo, which you notice running down the lads' necks down the back of the colours. The women had a variety of perfumes. All seemed to emanate from the tightly pulled scarves around them in front of you at Mass. And many of the older women at Mass doused themselves with talcum powder, and they floated up to Holy Communion in a cloud of talcum powder on their way to heaven. But the best smells of all came from passing by the shops. The smell from the various chippers was only gorgeous, as was the smell of fresh bread from Johnson Mooney's. One smell I didn't like, though, was the smell from the dairies which sold loose milk. and you could smell stale milk and sour milk as you passed by. Then there was another smell when the deliveries were being made by the bread man to Mrs. Connaughton's shop next door to where I lived, and using the horse and cart. Now the smells produced by a standing horse are best left to the imagination. Then another lovely smell was when I went to Kevin Street Library. The smell of the books and the evocative smell of the special binding that the books were bound in. Now moving on, yells were of course part of my childhood. Simple yells playing in the street. Queenie I-O, who has the ball? And then the other yells were from when you were playing football and banging against the end of somebody's wall. So you got a yell from whoever scored. Then you got another yell from the man in the house coming out, yelling music till you get home, or she'd tell your mammy what you were at. And of course, we won't ever forget the lady with the wheelbarrow and the fish, because I was in that class on that day when Brother O'Neill did exactly that. So there you are. Now, some of the most uncomfortable yelling, of course, was in school when you got belted and hit by the brother. Thanks be to God, that's long since past. So, bells, smells and yells of life in the Tenters, though they're long gone, they continue to come up like incense within my heart and stay forever up in a memory. Thank you.
Tony, that was really, really lovely. I really enjoyed that. Thank you so much. We are delighted now to welcome Kathy Scuffle, who is a DCC historian in residence, and she'd like to do a piece now called The Owlad in the Square, which traces a colourful family history with a splash of blue. Please welcome Kathy Scuffle.
And all will be revealed, of course. So I'm going to bring you right back to home. I have to head out, Kathleen. The union want to check on the fella doing the job at the Tenters. I'll call into Ma and Dad first and bring Kaka. They'd love to see her. Kaka was my childhood pet name. With these words, we left our house in Rupert Street, Dolphin's Barn, for the short walk to Bellevue Buildings down in Blackpits, where my grandparents, along with various generations of the Scuffles, lived. The men in our well-regarded family of mainly redheads were painters, decorators, signwriters and grainers with a reputation as hard workers. As a rep with the Irish National Painters Union, Dad regularly inspected jobs on public or state sites to ensure union rules compliance. And I would regularly go on these visits, enjoying Dad's stories of places and people in the Liberties. This particular check related to a report of an old lad painting the park railings at Oscar Square. He never left the site and was regularly spotted tucking into a bowl of coddle in the middle of the park, chatting with the passing locals. The union were curious as to who he was. The back route from the barn brought us through Guinness's, Pimlico, via Newmarket, with a nod to the blacksmith there, who was some class of extended relative of Dad's family. Everyone in the Liberties seemed to be related in some way. As we entered the buildings, we met Dad's brother Jimmy, my favourite uncle, who said as he ruffled me ginger curls in mirror of his, that he had just left Nana on her own in number 1, as the family home was called. Jimmy was on his way to bring a message from Nana to Granda, who was on a job. We continued to number 1, passing a small piece of wasteland, universally known as the desert. This tiny corner of no man's land left over from when the houses were originally built, was everything in a child's imagination, and had been thus when Dad, his siblings, and those of the previous Scuffle generations were growing up. To us grandchildren, it could be a battleground, a house, a shop, a parkland. We played cowboys and cowgirls, and on one memorable occasion, it was the site of the moon landings. It was so handy. A quick climb over the side wall brought you into the facilities at number 1 whenever they were needed. We knocked the window of number 1 as usual, being careful not to tip over the glass milk bottles on the sill as we let ourselves in. The key was permanently in the hall door, which was left open during the day. Nana had the kettle, as always, on the boil. "You just missed Jimmy," she said. We sat, chatted, stoked the fire. Dad filled the coal bucket and killed a good hour, catching up on general family news and neighbourhood gossip. Another knock on the window. Father O'Byrne from Francis Street on his bike, doing his visits. He knew about the boiling kettle and scuffles too, and was a regular caller to the house. Leaving Nana to Father O'Byrne's company, we headed home, through Roper's Rest, acknowledging the ghost of the Headless Horseman, up through the Tenters, with the promise of chocolates and burns of Cork Street, after we had checked in on Oscar Square. As we approached the park, paint tins, sandpaper, brushes, all scattered on the saving sheets under the partially but newly painted, now blue, railings. Sitting on the low wall around the statue of Our Lady were 2 men, one in white overalls, but both tucking into steaming bowls of coddle. As we approached, the second man smiled widely and opened his arms and called for Kaka to run to him. "Uncle Jimmy," I squealed as he ruffled my curls for the second time that day. And the other man, the reported owl lad, well, he was my granda, delighted with a local job that meant he could have a hot dinner delivered from home each day instead of the usual cold sandwiches. It also meant he had, daily, the good company and chat of his family, neighbours and friends from Black Pits, the Liberties and the Tenters. He was the owl lad who painted the Oscar Square Park railings blue.
Thanks very much, Kathy. That was brilliant. We are going to have Noel up again to sing for us again. He is going to perform a lovely tune called Love's Old Sweet Song.
Once in the dear dead days beyond recall, when on the world the mist began to fall, out of the dreams that rose in happy song, low to our hearts love sang an old sweet song. And in the dusk where fell the firelight gleams, softly it wove itself into our dreams. Just a song at twilight, when the lights are low. When the lights are low. Not that low. And the shadows softly come and go. Though the heart grow weary. Though the heart grow weary. Sad the day and long. Sad the day and long. Still to us the twilight. Still to us the twilight. Sings love's old song. Sings love's old song. Sings love's old sweet song. Sings love's old sweet song. Even today we sing our song of yore. Deep in our hearts it lies forevermore. Footsteps may falter, weary grow the way. Still we can hear at the close of the day. So to the end, when life's dim shadows fall, love will be found the sweetest song of all. Just a song at twilight, when the lights are low, when the lights are low, the flickering shadows, and the flickering shadows, softly come and go, softly come and go. Though the heart be weary, though the heart be weary, sad the day and long, sad the day and long, still for us a twilight, still for us a twilight, sings love's old song, sings love's old song, sings love's old sweet song. And that song, whose music was written by
James Lynham McGoy.
From where?
Offaly.
Where?
Offaly.
Thank you very much.
We sing song before the night is out. We'll be out there singing our heads off, I'm sure of it. Next up is Seamus Dooley, who has been very instrumental in organising this evening. He's done Trojan work. He's also a good friend of mine. We're constantly in Oscar Square, our kind of lifeline with our dogs. You'll see Seamus coming over on a Sunday morning with tea and coffee to feed us and water us on a Sunday morning. Seamus is doing a self-penned original number piece called The Square with a Heart. Thanks, Seamus.
Tony O'Shea leaves his house and strolls across the road. Stick in hand, Rua, his faithful companion, excitedly by his side. A group of neighbours are gathered at the plinth under the serene gaze of Our Lady Queen of Peace, who has been keeping an eye on proceedings at the square since 1955 and never moved once. As the award-winning Kerry photographer draws near, he realises that this is no ordinary stroll in the park. In front of the statue is a giant photograph of Tony's newly published book, The Light of Day. A retrospective exhibition of Tony's work was one of the early casualties of the COVID-19 lockdown. The planned book launch at the Photo Museum in Temple Bar was cancelled. Tony's friends, neighbours and many admirers were having none of it. If we could not go to a book launch, then the launch could come to us. Socially distanced and masked, we celebrated as the light of day, saw the light of day in Oscar Square, for long the beating heart of the Tenters. Earlier, our small kitchen in St. Thomas's Road bustled and hummed and sung as Brian Cook prepared cocktail sausages, filled flasks and packed fruit, sweets and treats into individual boxes, just as Dr. Tony had ordered. Rosa baked biscuits. Aideen supplied, as she always does, exotic Belgian chocolates. Mary, Bruce, Olive and Ty even turned up at 9 instead of the usual 10. Our Lady nearly fell off her plate. No pandemic was going to stop us celebrating a remarkable achievement by one of our own. We thought of everything. Well, nearly everything. We forgot to book a photographer. But of course Tony duly obliged, he always does. For my 60th birthday party, the neighbours gathered in Oscar Square for a highly regulated dog party that would put Boris and his knees up to shame. Oscar Square has long been an oasis for young mothers and during lockdown witnessed many children's parties. On the eve of May Day, Father Oligus recited the Rosary. Amid the cherry blossoms that we love so much, Noel O'Grady sang The Queen of the May. We recorded the event and made it available online to residents required to cocoon. Remember those days? On Sundays, we took to serving tea and coffee, a practice which has been sustained, weather and park opening hours permitting. Over time, deep and abiding friendships were forged and have been sustained. When Brian died, we had a COVID farewell. Phil and Drew sang the parting glass, the traditional song of farewell, undergoing a hastily arranged gender reassignment in the process. Miraculously, on that day, the dogs stopped barking. A magpie sang in Oscar Square. Throughout the pandemic, the community grew in solidarity. We mourned the cruel killing of Aisling Murphy. In 2022, we held a St. Patrick's Day parade, and it became a solidarity gathering, remembering especially a brave Ukrainian woman killed delivering dog food to a dog pound in Kiev. In happier times, we had weaving, treasure hunts, picnics, guided walks, talks, and, as you saw, a magical film premiere. At that premiere, Billy Mooney looked at the images of his own wedding, which you saw tonight, calling out the names of the guests, including the man who still hasn't bought a present. We served minerals, popcorn and sweets at a gathering graced by so many people who have formed the backbone of the Tenters long before the likes of blow-ins like myself. When a neighbour produced a wicker basket of oysters and Prosecco, an older resident raised her eyes towards Mary Queen of Heaven and proclaimed, "Jesus, move over, Molly Malone." My own efforts to impress by proffering a not-so-shabby bottle of Pinot Grigio was received with a disdainful, "Have you no ice cubes or 7-Up?" Our very own Oscar ceremony made headlines and memories. Maureen and some of the other ladies even made the front page of the Irish Times. Betty and Maureen became national celebrities. Truth to tell, Oscar Square has its share of secrets. Every morning you can witness scandalous scenes of debauchery. Maddie leads Mr. Ben, an innocent man, on and will not take no for an answer. The exploits of Paddy, Simba, Oscar, Ollie, Holly, Comet, Darwin, Connell, and the precocious Riker and their friends are sadly not for delicate ears. As we celebrate our centenary, let us raise a toast to those who had the vision to build the Tenters' esteem, and above all, those who had the imagination to place Oscar Square at the heart of the Tenters.
That was absolutely brilliant. Thanks a million for that. I'm getting very emotional. No, we have. We've all become really good friends from growing over with the doggies and our kids and everything over the years. And it's a wonderful place to live. But I think Seamus really said it all in that piece, and it was brilliant. That's it for this evening. Thank you so much, everybody. We do have one last but not least item. We just want to say thank you to everyone who came this evening. It's wonderful to see everyone here. We're going to have it in the National Stadium, I think, the next time. There's been so much.
Another 100 years, though. We're going to
another 100 years, yeah. I will have it next week. There are refreshments, as I say, courtesy of the North Credit Union, who are open for business. If anybody wants a loan, maybe we can ply them all with a few drinks of wine, and they'll do a deal on our interest rate. Oh my goodness!
This is one of the
So, last but not least, he's some fella, I don't know who he is. Lives like Clarence Mackin Road, I think. I don't know, he's a singer, actor. Just to round the whole evening off, please welcome to do a few numbers, Phelim Drew.
As if Finnegan lived in Walking Street, a gentleman Irish mighty odd. He had a brogue both rich and sweet, and a rise in the world he carried on. Well, Tim had a bit of a tippler's way, with a love of liquor he was born, and to help him on his way he stayed and rather than break every morn. Wait till the lab and you last your partner around the floor, which I'd love to say. I'll tell you lots of fun and pretty good way. One morning Tim felt rather full. His old head felt heavy, which made him shake. He fell off the ladder and he broke his skull. They carried him home, his corpse to wake. Well, they rolled him up in a nice clean sheet, and they laid him out upon the bed, with a bottle of whiskey at his feet, and a barrel of porter at his head. Right, put it down with your hands to your partner round the floor with your rubbish shake. Isn't it the truth? I'll tell you lots of fun and Finnegan's Wake. His friends assembled at the wake, and Mrs. Finnegan called for lunch. Well, first she gave them tea and cake, pipes, tobacco and a brandy punch. Well, the widow alone began to cry. Susie Cox, did you never say? Harry Timber, Pauline, why did you die when you held your cross? His money McGee. Wait for the dam, you dance to your partner around the floor with your rubbish shake. Isn't it the truth? I'll tell you lots of fun and Finnegan's Wake. Well, Mary O'Connor took up the job. Harry Biddy says she, you're wrong, I'm sure. Well, Biddy fetched her a belt in the gob and left her sprawling on the floor. Well, Sybil Ward, if then engaged, was woman and man to man. Chalet now was all the rain, and her ever-rushing soon began. What? So now you dance to your partner around the floor, which has rubbish shake. Isn't it the truth? I tell you lots of fun and Finnegan's Wake. Well, Mickey Maloney raised his head, and a bottle of whiskey flew at him. He ducked and landing on the bed, the whiskey scattered over Tim. I'll be dad, he revives, and see how he rises. Tim Finnegan rising in the bed, saying, twirling the whiskey around like flies, been 100 days. You think I was dead? What? And now you dance to your partner around the floor, which has never said. Isn't it the truth? I'll tell you lots of fun and Finnegan's Wake. L1.
Thank you very much. Thank you.